air vent here?
Yeah, well, again, that goes all the way back to the 53 model year. That was, again, you got to remember back in 1953 when this first body style came out, there was no air conditioning. So your air conditioning was a fold-up vent. In fact, I can show you.
Yeah.
It pops open from a handle. And
this has to be the last year a car had a vent like that, wouldn't it be? Welcome to another edition of The Story Behind the Car. We're with Pete, and this car has a lot of story behind it, and it's a tribute vehicle as well. It's a 1961 Studebaker Hawk. And Pete, where should we start to document this vehicle?
Well, again, in 60 and 61, the Hawk line became just the Hawk.
Okay.
And in fact, Studebaker almost didn't build the 61 Hawk. They were slated to discontinue it after the 60 model year, but the dealers came back, and because all they had was the Lark to sell at that point in time, they actually pushed Studebaker to build a 61 Hawk.
Okay.
So a lot of things that when Studebaker came out and put this car together, they upgraded or they did things to improve, hopefully, the showroom presence of the car, but also how it would be reflected on the company as being something that was different and something that was unique out in the marketplace.
Okay, and I'm going to wander around. We don't. We can talk about whatever you would like to. I'd love to talk about the engine. Just
the base Studebaker 289 V8 engine. It's not a Ford engine. It's a Studebaker engine.
Yes.
You can always tell because the distributor's in the back on a Studebaker.
Okay.
And yeah, this engine has been, again, rebuilt to the original specifications. It's nut and bolt correct assembly, and it's complete. The air conditioning is fairly unique on these cars.
I was going to say, that looks like a big one, too.
Well, and that's a York compressor, and that's an original Studebaker York compressor that we managed to find NOS, actually through the guy who does all the air conditioning work for Excalibur.
Okay.
You know, the Excaliburs were based off of Studebakers originally, and so he did all the air conditioning work using the old Studebaker components on the early version Excaliburs.
So this engine, to me, looks rather complicated for 1961. Not complicated in a bad way, but very, well, complicated. There's a lot in there.
Well, yeah, and again, everything is mechanical. It's actually pretty tight underneath that fan shroud. Because of the amount of pulleys and things to run the air conditioning, but the only upgrade this car didn't have was power brakes, and the power brake unit would have filled this space in on the car.
Okay.
Other than that, it's a pretty tight engine compartment.
Yeah, for 1961, and there's the famous S for Studebaker on the wheel cover. Air vent here.
Yeah, well, again, that goes all the way back to the 53 model year. That was, again, you got to remember back in 1953 when this first body style came out, there was no air conditioning. So your air conditioning was a fold-up vent. In fact, I can show you.
Yeah.
It pops open from a handle. And
this has to be the last year a car had a vent like that, wouldn't it be?
No, X64.
Really?
Actually, the 64 model year.
There it is. Wow.
Yeah, the 64 model year, again, because this body was used all the way through the GT Hawks.
Okay.
So if you look at the sheet metal on this car, it's basically all the same as that 64 Hawk there.
Yes.
And again, the original body style came out in 1953 as the Studebaker Commander or Champion Starliner, right?
Okay.
And the only major change actually from here to there was they changed this roof line. But other than that, the sheet metal underneath here is the same as the sheet metal on that car.
Wow.
This fin, that's a metal fin. It was added on over the course of years, starting in 57, and then
this is a 57
here? This is a 57 through the 61.
Wow.
So, yeah, the red Cloisonne, badges, that was unique to 60 and 61.
And I love the rear, the vented windows, front and rear.
Well, and what was unique again on these cars is there's no partition line here.
Oh wow! I didn't even notice that.
So when this window opens, come on. There's no partition line here.
Very nice.
On these cars. So it's you got a clear shot without a bar in the way.
Yeah.
So again, that was unique. The rear windows pop out. These just
Yes.
vent out like that. So there's a lot of unique stuff that went into how these cars actually function.
Yes. Do you mind if we open the door while we're on this side of the car?
No, for
Studebaker
sure.
was very advanced.
Well, I mean, they got high marks for their dashboards. Very simple, full gauge, and all of these Studebakers came with full gauges. In fact, if this has a tachometer, if it hadn't had a tach, the clock that you see to the right of the radio would have been in that space where the tach is, and that would have had a blank out in it.
Wow. And a padded dash too in 61.
Padded dash, yeah. Well, and again, the first year for bucket seats.
Okay.
And these are unique to 61. In 62, when they came out with the GT, they actually made the bucket seats 4 inches narrower so they could put a console in between the two seats.
Yeah, because those are pretty darn wide.
So, and the fabric on these seats is unique. Studebaker had the fabric custom made, so it has the little hawk bird. If you look really closely, you can see the Studebaker Hawk is embroidered right into the fabric.
Yes.
And again, they would never do that again because of the expense that was involved. It was a matter of upgrading the interiors.
And what is that, the heater or
that's
is that
the air conditioner? So that's a factory air conditioner unit.
Wow.
That would have been in the car. Yeah, it was basically a bolt-in, and it.
And are those the dials for temperature and for?
On the left are the dials for the temperature and the fan speed, and it has a continuous rheostat for the fan speed. And the three in the middle are just directional vents.
Wow.
Which way it would blow through that grill.
Yeah. And what kind of what mileage do you have? How many miles are on the car?
Well, right now under 300. The car was just finished in spring, and it's been to a couple of shows, but we're still sort of in the break-in period with the car.
Yes. And a solid closing door and Hawk badging. And what is the color?
Well, this is Flamingo. Okay, this is a 1-year only color for Studebaker.
Okay.
In fact, initially you could only get this color on the Hawk or on a Lark convertible.
Okay.
They wouldn't put it on the sedans until after March of 61. At the very tail end of the production year, they would allow you to put this color onto a standard Lark sedan. But prior to that, this color was unique for the Hawk and for the convertibles.
And antennas back here, this far back, that's interesting.
Yeah, well, and again, this is part of the optional. This has the 8-tube push-button radio in this car. It says the deluxe radio.
Yeah, with tube.
That includes the back seat and front seat speaker and a fader, and then it has the optional rear mount antennas, and they actually both connect, believe it or not. It's an interesting part of that puzzle.
Interesting exhaust tailpipes.
Well, and again, those exhaust extensions were used pretty much continuously from about 57. He doesn't have one from like 57 on.
Okay.
And that was another factory accessory.
And the fins are just beautiful.
Well, and again, they're metal.
Yeah.
They're not. I mean, people think they're fiberglass because in '56 on the original Golden Hawks, they used a fiberglass fin that first year.
Okay.
But then they switched. They made the metal stamping, and actually the stampings throughout all the years with the fins like this are the same stamping. All they did was trim the front differently. So you see on that '57 it comes to a point.
Yes.
But on here it's truncated off at the front to make a new chrome stop that the two bands touch into to finish the chrome off.
And would they have been leaded in? Would they use?
No, actually, underneath this strip, they're actually fasteners.
Wow.
And this little strip right here, has bolts that are up inside of it that it snaps through holes and holds the inner part of it in place.
Wow.
So it has little T-shaped bolt heads that fit into this strip, and that strip is what holds this fin on.
Amazing.
It's actually, it's bolted through into the trunk.
Yeah. And can I open the passenger door?
Sure.
Would you rather open or?
No, you can do it. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, this car, all the interior in this car, the door panels, the armrests, it's all NOS parts. So everything is as it would have been from Studebaker. in 1961.
And on the transmission tunnel, what is that pattern?
Well, there's an opening under there.
Okay.
That you would take those 4 screws out, pull that plate off, and that's how you would check the transmission fluid level.
Wow.
Because the Flight-O-Matic transmission in this car, the dipstick is underneath that little panel.
Yes.
Same thing on the driver's side. There's a little round circular plug like that. Underneath that is actually the master cylinder for the brakes.
Oh yeah, I see that.
Yep,
and I see your vent there.
Yep, and underneath that is where the master cylinder fill is.
Very utilitarian and well thought out.
Well, it was, again, by the time this car was made, they would have started trying to work on making hanging pedals and get the master cylinder up on the firewall.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, this car never got that change made. Even through the end of production in '64, I mean, this is the last of that body style.
Yeah.
And the master cylinder is still under the floor.
Amazing.
So.
And I'll have to go around to the other side to get to look. I do want to look at the air conditioning because I find it interesting how large they are.
And heavy.
Yeah.
You wouldn't believe that compressor weighs like 26 pounds.
I'm sorry?
So that compressor weighs like 26 pounds. I mean, that compressor is a solid block of casting.
Yeah.
And it's quite heavy at that. And in fact, it's even something as simple as this prop rod for the 61 Hawk with air conditioning, because it clears differently than the way the originals were done.
Okay.
They had to change this configuration and make it special so it clears to be able to put it in its storage position.
Just the lines and the detail, just amazing. And that light right there.
Yeah.
Just gorgeous.
Yeah, and again, it was. You see the changes that they made that were not tremendously large from year to year,
okay.
But it was significant enough to make the cars different year by year by year as they went into the dealership.
Yeah, and just this prop rod, like you were saying, I could just imagine that they ran into the problem. Some guys were standing around.
And let's figure out how to fix it. And
yes.
So they put this extra bend in it, because the prop rod would have mounted. See, here's the original prop rod mount hole.
Okay.
And now it's moved up to here. And the same thing on this side, the bracket mount for it was here.
Okay.
And now it's there in order to clear that prop rod.
Yeah.
And then, in order to make it clear the hood when the hood closes, they put this extra bend in it so that as the hood closes, that rod is low enough that it won't hit the hood.
Okay. And your tribute, yeah. Amazing.
So give you a chance to look at it with the hood closed.
Yeah. And I'll have to take a picture with the hood down too, just for the. But this light right here, to me, is just beautiful. The lines on it.
Well, and again, that's how, you look at where the turn signals were on that car in 57,
oh, yeah.
And here they moved them down, and they changed the insert in this grill.
It looks far better down here than up on the top.
Again, as cars were developing, it became more practical to have it in that kind of a position.
Yes. Well, is there anything we haven't covered, Pete, that we should before we wrap things up?
As we were talking, this was my wife's car.
Yes, I didn't want to say anything unless you wanted to.
Yeah, and so the history on it was that before my wife and I were married, we went to car shows. That's what we did because we were a couple of kids with not much scratch.
Yes.
And back in the early 70s, you could find a car show where if you showed up with something, they'd give you a coupon for a hamburger or something like that if you went to the show, if you showed up for a cruise night. And so that was our date night, was to go to, and I have a 1941 Buick, I've got a 56 Chevy pickup truck, I had old stuff even then.
Yeah.
And so I told her, pick any car you like. If you find something you really, really like, I can restore anything. So find something you want and I'll restore a car for you. And this is before we were married. And so
wonderful.
She spent some time and looked at a lot of shows and finally found a car like this.
Yes.
It was this color, it was flamingo. It had all the wants on it. But this was before we were married, and I said, well, we've been saving money for the wedding, so you decide. We can have the big wedding you want to have, or we could buy the car and go to the courthouse.
Yes.
And she made the decision, I really, really want to have the wedding, and we'll find the car down the road.
Yes.
So we got married in '77, and it took us more than 10 years before we got the first Studebaker, and almost 20 to find a car good enough that we could actually restore for her.
Yes.
And so the project started. We knew we were working for it, joined the Studebaker Club, went to meets, did all kinds of stuff.
Oh my goodness.
Bought a 62 Studebaker Hawk, so we had something to go to shows with and stuff. At least we're not going to the Studebaker Club meets, in some brand X.
Yes.
But it took a long time to try and find this car. And so when we finally did, and in the meantime, she would buy parts for it, knowing we're going to have a 61 Hawk someday. And so birthdays and Christmas presents and anniversaries, she'd get a part, I'd get a part. We'd be swapping parts back and forth. But we got a pretty good collection of new old stock stuff until we finally found the car.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So started to work on the car, bought this car in '94, and from that point on started working on it. Had it pretty much all torn apart, and my wife passed in 2005.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And knew about the car, knew what we were working towards, but I couldn't do anything with it for a couple of years. It's one of those things I look in the garage and there's a lot associated with that.
I bet, yeah.
But finally got to the point where, okay, I have all these parts, I have the car, it just needs to be really put together. And so spent about the last 4.5, 5 years finishing the car and getting it all back together again.
Yeah.
So,
and what a beautiful tribute too.
Yeah, it's what she wanted.
Yes.
But
dedication too on her behalf.
Yeah. Well, for a girl who didn't have a driver's license until after we were married, she biked everywhere she went.
Wow.
So it was a matter of becoming a car person and loving going to the cars. She would book, Studebaker meet is here, we're going. Before again, as soon as it's announced, she's out booking the hotel. Yep, we're going to this Studebaker meet because there's going to be a Studebaker there. We're going to find one. We're going to figure it out. So.
Oh my gosh.
So she was really she was one of those rarefied, all about the cars.
Yeah.
In fact, I think she mentioned to me once, that well, gee, I really married you because you restored this car for me, and I think she might have been the plan after all.
Well, you married up.
I certainly did.
Yes,
I certainly did. So,
well, thank you so much, and thank you for sharing not only the story about your car, but a tribute to your wife.
Yeah, I'm glad to have it done, and I'm glad that other people can appreciate it too.
Yes. Well, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.